So it's Christmas Day 2012 and I'm recording an analysis of a game I played on chess.com a couple of years ago. I was playing white and my opponent and I were both rated about 2000 on the website, so that gives you an idea of the standard. I started with pawn e4, my opponent played pawn e6, then we have d4, d5. And these are the first four moves of the so-called French defense, which has a reputation of being solid for black and hard for white to break down, but also difficult for black to win from. Black often ends up with quite a cramped position, but in compensation does have a clear target to attack, which is this pawn on d4, as you'll see in this game. Now in this position white has many options, of course. Very common is knight c3, after which black often plays bishop b5 and white plays e4 and black plays c5. The attack on this d4 pawn and trying to undermine this e5 pawn is a common feature in the French. In response to knight c3, black sometimes plays knight f6, in which case white can either play bishop g5, pinning the knight, or advancing the pawn, pushing the knight back straight away. But in this case I didn't play knight c3. I played the so-called advanced variation straight away, where white pushes the e4 pawn forward to e5, and this attempts to take away space. For example, it takes away this f6 square, which is the natural square for the knight to come out at. And black played c5, attacking this pawn. Now obviously if I was to take this pawn, black could take back with the bishop, and I think that looks quite nice for black. This pawn is going to be very hard on e5 to defend, so white doesn't normally do that, and of course I didn't. I played c3, defending the pawn. Black then played knight c6. Playing knight c6 before c5 for black would be a mistake, because the c pawn would then be trapped on c7 and wouldn't be able to get forward to join in the attack on this d4 pawn. So playing c5 before knight c6 is certainly something you need to do if you're playing the French. And I played knight f3, defending the pawn on d4 and developing a minor piece. And at this point, black has two main options, you see. One is to bring the queen out to b6, adding further attack to the d4 pawn and also attacking the b2 pawn, and also bishop d7. This wide squared bishop can be quite hard to develop in the French for black. But in this game, black played a move I haven't seen before in my game, certainly, and that is f5. Now, I could take the pawn en passant like that, and if I had my time again, I think I would play that move. But in this game, I actually played a3, looking to play b4 in a few moves' time. Black played g6, which I find a little bit surprising. Though this pawn formation of having pawns on d5, e6, f5 and g6 reminds me quite a lot of the Stonewall variation of the Dutch defense, except in that opening, this pawn on e5 sorry, is normally on e3, and that leaves this e5 square available for a knight, for example this knight on f3 to hop into, which is quite good. Obviously I don't have that opportunity in this game because there's a pawn on e5. At this point I'm thinking it's not looking fantastic for white. Not too bad though. I played bishop g5, attacking the queen. A queen can't take, of course, because the bishop is defended by the knight. And black moved the queen, and at the same time attacked the pawn on b2. Queen's also, of course, attacking indirectly the pawn on d4. I played b4, which is one reasonable way to defend this pawn. I could have played queen c2, for example, or queen d2. We then exchanged pawns on d4, and that got to this position. Now, if I'd been black now, I probably would have played bishop to e6 to exchange off this dark squared bishop, or possibly bishop h6. But black played pawn to h6, forcing the bishop back. I'm not sure it's the best thing to do for black to push these pawns forwards so recklessly as he has done in this case. I brought the bishop back to e3. I didn't want it to go to d2 because it would block the queen defending d4. It's also quite a nice thing to have the bishop in line with the black queen on b6. And black continued with his pawn thrust by playing pawn g5. And I played knight c3, developing another knight. Now, black played at this point f4, and you may notice he can force this bishop away and then play g4 and force the knight away, and that gives him knight and queen attacking the pawn on d4 and only my queen defending it, so it doesn't look fantastic. So what can white do in this position? Well, it might be a nice exercise to try pausing the video just for a few seconds or a minute or so and having a look at this position and thinking, what would you play if you were white? Well, in response to f4, white doesn't have to actually play move the bishop straight away. He can play, for example, knight a5, forcing the queen back, and then if, for example, bishop c1, then even if black pushes the pawn g4 and the knight moves, then white still has sufficient defense on the d4 pawn. And by pushing this pawn to g4, the pawn on f4 would be vulnerable for black. So that's what could have happened. I didn't spot the knight a5 game. I've only spotted that during the analysis of the game, which is why it's quite a good idea to go over your games with the aid of a computer especially. So I wanted to retreat my bishop, and I didn't want to put it on bishop to d2 because it blocks the queen defending d4, so I played bishop c1. And black could have played now g4 but didn't, and I think it's perhaps because he spotted that I had the riposte knight a4. Whether I would have spotted that, I'm not too sure, but I think black probably spotted it, and he played bishop g to e7. I then played b5 in an attempt to force away that knight from the d4 square and relieve some of the pressure, and black moved the knight to a5. I then played quite a strange move. I played bishop b2. I didn't really like the thought of having my bishop right back where it started after all this time, so I played it to this square. I'm not entirely sure how useful it is on that square, and I suspect bishop b2 wasn't my best move in this position. Black then played bishop g7, and I played bishop e2, so we're both getting ready to castle now. Black played bishop d7. He can now castle either way, and I played a4. And what I'm looking to do here is put bishop a3 and swap off this bishop for the knight on e7, because I'm starting to think that this bishop on b2 is a bad bishop for me, because I've got these pawns on these fixed pawns on d4 and e5, and I can't move them, and that restricts the movement of my bishop. On the other hand, my white squared bishop can move freely along these diagonals and looks to me to be a better piece. After a4, black castled, kingside, and I played then bishop a3. Of course, the knight here may be looking to come in to the f5 square, from which he can add further pressure onto my d4 pawn. But of course the knight is pinned at the moment and can't move at all, because otherwise I'd get the exchange by playing bishop takes rook. Black played rook f7, defending the knight but also relieving the pin, so next time he can play knight f5. And I did bishop takes knight. Actually, looking back, I probably should have played bishop c5, attacking the queen. Even if just as an intermediary move, but I played bishop takes knight, so we have bishop takes knight, rook takes bishop, and then white castles. And it's very, very common in the French that black, in addition to having an attack on the d4 pawn, has activity down this c file, because once the c pawn's been pushed forward to c5, normally is exchanged on d4, as in this game. It gives black an opportunity to put his rooks on that file, so it was no surprise to me when black played rook c8. And I played rook c1, looking to contest that file. Now, at this point black played knight c4, and this is a nice position for the knight to be. I can't dislodge it with a pawn, so I'm going to have to exchange it at some point. And from here it's attacking some fairly dangerous squares in my territory, and I could be open to all sorts of tactical possibilities, so I decided to exchange pieces on the c4 square. So we ended up in that position. I then played knight e2, defending the pawn on d4 and also looking to exchange rooks. Now if black could play now rook e to c7, that would be great, doubling rooks. And you can see this bishop is rather unfortunately placed. If this bishop was back on the e8 square, black, I'm sure, would play rook e to c7, but luckily for me he can't do so. But he did strengthen the file by playing queen c7. I exchange rooks, queen takes, and at this point, let's just spend a second or so looking at this position. Black's attacking down the c file. Eventually he's going to get a rook on this file. He's got an attack on d4, he's threatening my a4 pawn, and in return, what have I got in terms of an attack? Actually very little. I'm playing pretty passively, pretty defensively, and I think I'm probably losing this game at this point. When you're losing a game like this, in my experience, I'd certainly rather go down fighting, and it's a good idea to often play actively. At the moment I've got no possibility of launching any sort of an attack, so play actively and also try to complicate the situation. So I played this move h4, looking to take advantage of the fact that black has these pawns pushed further forward. If these pawns were placed now on h7, g6 and f7, I think it'd be looking not very good for me at all. Black also has the bishop pair, two bishops are often better than two knights. Not always, but in most cases. So I'm not too sure how much I saw after h4, but as you'll see later, it turns out that pawn h4, I think, is the key move in the game. Black played g4, threatening the knight, and I moved knight h2. At this point, next move I'm threatening to take one of these pawns. So black played h5. I have then knight takes f4, and I'm also threatening the pawn on h5. The only way of defending that for black is to play bishop e8. And at this point I want to bring the rook into the game. The queen can't move unless it goes to, well, even if it's going to c1, I would lose the pawn on d4. The queen is defending both the pawn on d4 and the pawn on a4, so the queen can't really move. So I played rook e1. I may at some point be able to play rook e1, e3, and then rook e3, g3, and have some sort of attack against the king. So black played bishop h6. Perhaps he's also looking to exchange pieces here. And I didn't see this position when I played h4, but I started to see now that I have a potential sacrifice, which is knight takes g4, and that's what I played. And it might be a nice idea again to sort of pause the video now and think, what would you play if you were black? Because you've got two knights to take. You can do pawn takes knight or bishop takes knight. Which one would you play? Well, I think if black plays bishop takes knight, the game would perhaps continue knight f6 check, perhaps king f8, g3, and maybe rook g7, pinning the pawn. And in this position, I think black's okay. Of course, there's all sorts of complications. I've got knight takes bishop, king takes, and then queen in here. But of course, I'm a piece down, and I'm not sure in this position I've got compensation for the piece. Black didn't do bishop takes. He did pawn takes, and probably that was not the best of the two moves because it allows me to play queen takes pawn check. And black made then quite a serious blunder, I think. He could have moved the king, but he played rook g7, quite aggressive and looking to hit this g2 square. But of course I've got queen takes pawn check, and also attacking both bishops at the same time. So he played king h7, and at this point I played knight d5, taking a pawn, looking to play knight f6 check, next move with an attack on the queen. Perhaps black saw that because he played bishop f7. That move's still available to me. Oops. So bishop f7 and then knight f6 check, king h8, queen takes, bishop takes. Now white is now a piece down still, but has a full 5 pawns compensation. 3 pawns compensation would be level. I've got 5 pawns, so I'm 2 pawns up, and moreover these 2 central pawns and not too far away from queening, my next move was d5, and if I can get one of these 2 pawns to the finishing line down here, it's going to be game over. So I think White's quite comfortably winning this game now, and it turns out this a4 move basically got me back into the game. Black played bishop d2, attacking the rook, rook e4, attacking the bishop. A mistake for black here would be to play bishop d3, because I would have this move winning one of the bishops. He didn't play that. He played bishop b3. I then have e6. Let's push these pawns forward. I'm not too bothered about the pawns on this side of the board. If one of these pawns queens, it's going to be all over. And then black played bishop c3, attacking the knight. I ignored that threat and played pawn e7, and the only way black can stop this pawn from queening is to sacrifice his rook, which is what he did. And I played rook takes b7. Black then started sweeping up my pawns. Bishop takes pawn. And I played rook takes a7. I probably should have just pushed this d pawn forward. I'm not sure it would have made much difference. I played rook takes a7. Bishop takes on b5. d6. King g8. d7. And at this point, black resigned, because it's clear he's going to have to give up one of his bishops for this pawn to stop it queening. And at that point, I'm going to have 3 pawns and a rook against bishop, which I think we both saw was an easy win for black. So black could have played, for example, this move, but that doesn't help. He still ends up giving away a pawn, a bishop for the pawn, and you know, this is just a possible way the game could have ended, and that's just an easy win. So I hope you enjoyed that, and please come back to my channel if you liked it, and see some more games.